Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Pastoral Thoughts Podcast. This is your host, Jack Young, and in studio once again, I think 4 times, maybe 5 times on this podcast, Dr. Bill Grady, and it's always an honor to have him in. He is a renowned author, final authority, What God Hath Wrought, How Satan Turned America Against God, Given by Inspiration, Perilous Times, Holy Ground, and What Must I Do to Be Saved? Did I miss any books, Brother Grady?
No. Working on a new one, but that's it.
All right. Well, yeah, we'll have to talk about that too. And you were a professor at Hyles-Anderson College for 10 years and inspired people, provoked people, whatever, and always one of my favorite preachers to hear. And so thanks for coming back on the podcast.
Glad to be here.
What book are you working on right now?
A book called Everything Beautiful in His Time. Subtitle is Discerning God's End Game from the Beginning.
Excellent. And where are you headed with this?
Well, I'm trying to cover the history of the world, in 300 pages or less.
Okay.
But really a timeline of God, how he's dealing with men.
Would it be similar to Perilous Times? Your book?
Yes, it would be. And I take excerpts out of almost all of my previous books, the best material.
Beautiful.
And believe it or not, it started with a preacher's illustration from a black preacher in Chicago and moved up from Atlanta. So he tells this black folk's tale story, supposedly, about a buzzard that was taking little animals for rides, squirrels, rabbits, up in the air, but they took them higher than they thought they were going. Then he'd dump them off and scoop down and eat them up for a snack. Mm-hmm. And then a monkey was watching, and the monkey jumped on for his turn. Mm-hmm. He goes way up, and just about the time he's going to dump him off, the monkey grabs the buzzard by the throat, with his hands or with his tail, either way, and almost chokes him to death up there. And so, anyway, it's a quirky story, but he told it in a sermon illustration. He's right near Al Capone's neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Al Capone had just taken over the West Side. Same time this guy's preaching his little Baptist church. He has a wife and 2 or 3 kids sitting out there listening. One of the little kids grows up and kind of leaves the Lord's work and gets into secular music because he was a good singer. Mm-hmm. And he remembered that story. His father told me he wrote a song during World War II, and it became one of the top songs of the whole period to cheer up people because everybody's gloomy, right? And you'll never believe what the song was based on that story.
I'd love to guess, but
I bet you a quarter. I'll quote the first half, and you'll know the second half.
Yeah.
Straighten up. Tick, tick, tick. Time's up.
I am. What is it?
Straighten up and fly right.
Okay.
It's written by Nat King Cole.
Oh, okay.
And his father is Reverend something Cole. Mm-hmm. But of all things, the Lord put that silly thought on my heart. Satan always takes you further, than you plan to go. That was the idea of his daddy using it.
Yes.
But I built the whole book on that theme, that God created men straight, right? Just in his image. Mm-hmm. If you oppose the homosexual agenda, you're straight. Mm-hmm. Break into somebody's house, you're crooked. Mm-hmm. He's okay until a crooked serpent showed up. Mm-hmm. And he fell and he became crooked. You're of your father, the devil. And so all of mankind's been waiting for a straight redeemer to become crooked for us.
Amen.
So that we could become straight.
Yeah.
And so I got a 300-page book developing on the whole thing.
So you're going to integrate a lot of your other books into that book.
Yeah.
I think they'll be fabulous. My personal favorite book of yours is How Satan Turned America Against God. And I like American history. And so it was right up my alley. And then also, you buck the status quo talking points of the historical establishment as far as with 9/11, Oklahoma City bombing, the formation of Israel, things like this. And so many of those things in that book I thought were fabulous. And and you put a lot of investigation work into those. It's How Satan Turned America Against God, your book on Israel, And then What Hath God Wrought? I mean, you have hundreds of pages of footnotes there. However, the average layman, what were you telling me at lunch? You hand a kid a 150-page book on George Washington, and it's not
hardback. Don't forget 150-page hardback book.
Yeah, there's no way they're going to read it. But some layman's version of your books would be phenomenal. You'd have to figure out how to make it concise. Huh? Yeah.
Well, this book is going to be under 300 pages, or my wife will leave me. She's my proofreader. She's
sure
tired.
Sure. Your most successful, or we shouldn't say successful, your most sold book is what?
Well, Final Authority maybe, because it's the first one that came out. It's 15th printing in 93, but 3 years later, What Hath God Wrought came out. That's my wife's favorite book.
Okay.
And it's the hardest book I used to have to keep in print because the homeschool mothers buy it.
Yeah. No, it's a phenomenal book.
And, I guess the two best commercials the Lord ever
I read
gave
that when I was a senior in high school.
That's going back some years. The best endorsements I got, unsolicited, just 2 letters from Senator Jesse Helms from North Carolina and Judge Roy Moore from Alabama. They're both Baptists. Mm-hmm. And they both sent me beautiful letters about how much they enjoyed that book.
Yeah, amen.
So I get a little, mileage out of it.
Sure.
And how Satan turned America against God.
Were you commissioned to write the Final Authority?
No, except by the Holy Ghost, maybe.
Okay. What provoked you to write that?
Just learning the whole issue was so amazing to me. I didn't understand. I mean, I graduated from Hyles Anderson College in 1976. I went to school in 76, graduated in 81, never heard anything about the King James Bible, and then went out and built a church, a wonderful church still there, $3 million building they just put up the other day in Post Falls, Idaho.
Praise the Lord.
Never heard anything about the issue. So when I came back to teach, I'm teaching 2 years at Hyles Anderson, 800 students. I don't know anything about the King James issue yet. Mm-hmm. But a friend of mine gave me some tapes from Dr. Peter Ruckman, and I was converted overnight.
Yeah. And that inspired you to write that?
Yeah, because I was amazed.
And what year did that come out?
93.
93. And previous to that time, was different versions even really an issue?
Well, it all depends where you go. Most of the Baptist colleges in that heyday era, all the big schools. I mean, Bob Gray's school in Jacksonville just took the name Baptist off their church and school name. Mm-hmm. I mean, I read that on a big story on Facebook. I assume it's true. So in the colleges, it always goes south first.
Sure.
So, they're correcting the King James Bible in class while Jack Hyles is preaching out of it in a church pulpit. Mm-hmm. So he, that guy Joe Combs, who went to prison for 126 years and died in prison, I used to sit in class and say, the fool he had a lisp, the fool hath said in the thought there is no God. There is in italics, so it doesn't belong in the text. So the true rendering is the fool hath said in his heart, no God, not there is no God. That kind of stupidity.
Yeah.
So there was always dissension in the school.
Sure.
Putting doubts in the student's mind.
Well, and then I think a lot of people don't realize either that, you get a John R. Rice study Bible, he's going to correct, the King James, or, I got John R. Rice, some commentaries over here, and he'll quote other versions and things like that, but it wasn't an issue during that time period.
Right. He wrote our God-breathed book, the Bible, and recommended the New American Standard as the best translation.
Would you say that Final Authority, along with maybe New Bible Translations by Gail Riplinger, is there any other books that were very influential during this?
Influential to other people or to me?
I would say to our camp.
Our camp, so-called.
Well, let's say Independent Baptists.
Yeah.
Because before the 90s, it wasn't really a thing besides Peter Ruckman beating the drum.
He was the only nut.
Okay.
Was making a big deal out of it, and finally everybody caught up to him. Mark Rasmussen, who was at Hyles Anderson as a teacher while I was there, told me, his lips to my ears, that his father, Roland Rasmussen, Bob Jones, renegade, turned King James, used to send Jack Howes Ruckman's outlines and material. Dr. Howes didn't necessarily understand it even, but he trusted Rasmussen's feelings.
Sure.
And that led him to preach his sermon in 1984 in April, Logic Must Prove the King James Bible.
Okay.
And now he's going to become the standard bearer
Okay.
for fundamentalists. So it started, in a sense there, but it was really Ruckman's influence behind the scenes. That's what hit me, and that's what got Gail Riplicker going. And Gail Riplicker's first book, New Age Bible Versions, and my book, Final Authority, both came out the same year and the same month, March 93, and then they kind of took off. And
yeah, in the 90s were a really big turning point.
Yes, it was.
And so there were a lot of apologetic made for stance on the King James Bible where previous generations didn't understand exactly what was going on with the modern versions.
Christianity Today posted an article that there's a resurgence of interest in in return to the King James Bible.
It's supposed to be the most read Bible. It's not right at this time the most sold, but they say people who are fastidious Bible readers prefer the King James Bible.
Yeah.
So people who are very interested in reading the Bible on a daily basis, continual basis,
and
prefer
memorization,
because it's rhythmic and metered. What encouragement would you give to a pastor? Because we live in a biblically illiterate society, especially here in the Northeast. People have never owned a Bible before. I mean, full-grown adults, and so you win someone to Christ. You have new people in your church. What's a good way to talk to Joe Blow off the street, who what kind of Bible should I get, or how would you speak, or how would you talk to somebody instead of handing them your 800-page book, Final Authority?
Right.
How would you explain the issue to someone who's new to the faith?
Well, somebody that's new to the faith won't have the ability to really grasp the complicated side of this whole argument, because there's so many streams of complaint to it with the text and so forth. If any man will do his will, he'll know of the doctrine, Jesus said. Mm-hmm. So if a man his heart is yielded to God and doesn't know anything, he'll trust whatever you tell him if he's searching. Mm-hmm. You give him the most basic information, he should be trusting it. However, every good preacher, I'm blessed to be in travel 1,000 miles a week. I'm on a 20 church tour basically now. Mm-hmm. So I get to see a lot of preachers and get their feeling. And they're almost all going through something similar. And what they don't understand, why things are like they are. It's a great parallel. And I put this in maybe 2 different books, I don't remember where. But the parallel between Jesus as the living Word of God and your King James Bible as the written Word. Mm-hmm. Jesus is called the Word of God 7 times by John, who's a type of the church. Mm-hmm. And if you look at Jesus' physical body, it went through natural abuse. 8 days old, he's bleeding already at circumcision.
Right onto Shoecraft Road.
And he's dealing with circumcision 8 days into his life. Then he skips skins his knees as a kid, splinters as a carpenter. Mm-hmm. I made a joke. My wife thought I was crazy. What if somebody picked on his 4 brothers or his 2 little sisters? What's he going to do? Start praying about it? He's probably going to clock them.
Yeah.
Maybe he had bruised knuckles. Who knows? But his body suffered through life, right? But his body suffered the most with the cat of nine tails at the end of his life. Mm-hmm. That King James Bible, 400 plus years, has had its own, abuse.
Yeah.
But its greatest abuse is going to be the same way at the end of its run.
Okay.
And the equivalent of the cat of nine tails today is the internet.
Sure.
So, 30 years ago, your dad's pastoring in Heritage there. Some college kid comes in who's saved and he's got an NIV or something. Your dad can show him 16, 20 verses missing. You know what I mean? And convert him just like that. Give him a King James Bible and he's stuck for life, for good. You do that today, the kid goes home happy.
He's going to go Google it.
Or he'll email his friends, they're all excited, and then the friends will send him 300 websites. Mm-hmm. King James heretics, Ruckmanites, 5,000 mistakes in the King James. And you can't do a thing about that now. Mm-hmm. And God's letting that happen to his written word, just like he allowed it to happen to his living word. It's absolutely locked in. It's not going to get any better. It's going to keep getting worse. Evil men shall wax worse and worse. The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine.
How would you encourage pastors to educate themselves on the issue?
Well, the whole principle is that leaders are readers, and if leaders are readers, then writers are leaders of leaders. That's why anyone that's been led to write tries to put the material out there for leaders. Mm-hmm. I'd like Joe Grandmom to understand what I write, but probably it's over their heads. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to get leaders, primarily preachers, to read. But they're getting less and less interested in reading like anybody.
Yeah.
And the greatest preacher that ever lived on paper, the prince of preachers, we all know Spurgeon. Mm-hmm. He had a great quote that said, if a man will be quoted, he must quote. If a man would be read, he must read. There's your bibliography section, and footnote section, endnote section. Any man who refuses to use the brains of other men proves he has no brains of his own. Brethren, you need to read. Famous quote.
Yeah.
So if they'll read, and so take the trouble to read, not just look for Facebook paragraphs.
Yeah. I would think that as a pastor, or if you're in the ministry, that at least once a year you should read at least one book on the issue.
Probably,
just to stay fresh with it. I definitely feel comfortable defending the King James, but if I will get rusty on it if I'm not talking or studying the matter, and I think it's an important issue. And so, we should be.
Well, it's a spiritual book, and the enemy is always trying to come at it with intellectual argumentation. Mm-hmm. I've been in the ministry 50 years last August. I can't keep up with Hebrew and Greek. They're two dead languages that aren't used today. And, in Romans 1:18, all those sins Paul lists, one of them is debate, right next to murder. An old preacher one time said, we're not supposed to debate the word as much as we proclaim the word.
Yeah, and Charles Spurgeon said that I don't need to defend a lion in a cage. I just need to let the lion out of the cage, and that's what he was referring to the Bible. Is just preach the Bible, and I think people can see the difference when it's. I was just visiting somebody in a hospital. Doesn't go to our church, but has visited time, and again, it's somebody else told me that they're in the hospital. I went and visited, and I was reading some Psalms to the man. His wife was there. And she said, is that the King James? And I said, yes, it is. And she says, I love the way that sounds because it carries weight and authority. But people, even if it's preached or even read, it stands out from the others. And, of course, that isn't our only defense, obviously, but it is our blood-bought English book. I used the illustration Sunday night about John Rogers. Matthew's. He's in the tradition of the King James Bible, one of the translators of one of the English versions, forerunner for the King James Bible, and he was the first person burnt at the stake in the reign of Bloody Mary. His wife and 10 children and his congregation came down to the street where he was burned at the stake to cheer him on.
Right, play the man.
Yes,
that's what they kept saying.
And so he, went and gave his life. Tyndale, of course, our New Testament and our King James Bible is what percentage Tyndale?
Oh, quite a bit.
People say anywhere. I've read from 75 up to 90%.
Sure.
Of our New Testament is William Tyndale, and of course he was burned at the stake.
I wanted to use his jail cell. I wanted to fly to Belgium, where he was imprisoned, and photograph in Vilvoorde, Belgium, to photograph the dungeon area where he was held. Mm-hmm. To put that on the cover for Final Authority. And a week before I was going to fly, I found out that the castle had been bombed in World War II.
No kidding.
So we got that hammer on the cover instead.
There was a lot of historic buildings blown up during World War II.
Sure.
That is for sure. So American history. How did you get so interested in that? Because you wrote, 2,000 pages on American history, how Satan turned America against God, and then the one before that, What If God Wrought? I think are both phenomenal, great reads. And I do personally like American history, so that was right up my alley. So have you always been interested in American history? Or?
Well, bottom line is I got interested in history in general, having gotten saved out of the Catholic Church. 50 years ago, August 25th, 1974. I couldn't believe I'd been lied to so bad. So I began reading. First book I ever read was Life and Times as Jesus the Messiah.
Albert Edersheim.
900 pages. It was in my pastor's library. I was only saved 2 weeks, and I started reading that. So I wanted to catch up on what really happened.
Yeah.
And that led me to be more interested in church history than anything. Mm-hmm. But the American history wasn't so much American history as it was Baptist history in America, or American and Baptist history put together, which is what hath God wrought. And the thing that God used to spark me on that, you mentioned Barton Wall Builders.
Uh-huh.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm. David Barton.
Yeah. So I started watching his videos after Final Authority came out. I came across those and became intrigued with how much Christian heritage there was in this country. Funny sideline about his Wall Builders ministry, though. I called down there once because I wanted to carry his books on my book table. And I said, by the way, I'm curious because people might want to know where does Barton go to church? If I have his books, could you tell me where he goes to church? And whoever was running the show wouldn't tell me.
Sure.
And I asked him, why not? He says, well, if we say Baptist, the Church of God people won't buy.
Sure.
If we say Church of God, the Baptists won't. And I ran into him 2 times on 2 different airplanes. How's that for weird timing? So the first thing was watching those videos. I was intrigued. But the second reason was because of Chick Publications in Chino, California. Mm-hmm. So they started selling my book, Final Authority, right out of the gate and promoting it because they were strong King James. Very anti-Catholic ministry, and because I was Catholic, they got excited about that. They printed my testimony in their newspaper, Battle Cry.
Uh-huh.
Everything was going great. And that triggered one email and phone call after another from their Chick's readership. And I'm talking to all these dudes who are getting their emails and answering them. And you know what? All they wanted to know was if I could interpret their dreams, wanted to talk about acupuncture, this and that. And as I talked to them, probably hardly none of them were going to a Baptist church, and few were going to any church. Mm-hmm. And the Holy Spirit said, you need to put something out to show that there's something more than just the King James issue. That's important, but that's not the only issue. So I want to stress our Baptist heritage.
Sure.
And to this day, I turn down speaking engagements anytime I get asked if it's a Bible church, which are good people, mm-hmm. Or even a Southern Baptist church or a church that says we're Baptist, we just don't have the name on our sign. Mm-hmm. I won't preach there. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to maintain some consistency.
Yeah. What are some of the highlights from What Hath God Wrought?
Well, what
are some of your favorite things in that book?
Well, the first off the bat, the 2 main highlights were 2 endorsements I got. One letter from Jesse Helms in North Carolina, another one from Judge Roy Moore in Alabama. Mm-hmm. 2 strong, patriotic men, both Baptists. Judge Moore was a Golden Gloves boxer and a Marine. Mm-hmm. And Jesse Helms, known as Senator No. All the times he told the UN where to go.
Yeah.
Both of those men read that book and wrote me wonderful letters, really. But the highlights of that book, there were several. The main one was, to me, was what we covered last podcast about that Catholic conspiracy to invade America with immigration.
Yeah, let's talk about this for a minute.
Oh, yeah, man. You asked me if my wife ever travels with me. She doesn't because she got in a car wreck years ago, mm-hmm. and she has arthritis in her knees, and it was an illegal alien that ran a red light in Knoxville, Tennessee, went and hit her when she's on her way to church.
Yeah.
So it's got long-term effects.
Sure.
But you did a good job leading it on that last time.
Henry Morris? Not Henry Morris.
Not Henry Morris.
What Morris is that?
Yeah, the Samuel Morse, the Morse code inventor.
Yeah,
he lived in New York State, and he was a preacher's kid, PK, mm-hmm. not a Baptist, but his father was a Congregationalist pastor, and his secular biographer was called S. Irenaeus Prime. He got a 900-page biography on Morse, mm-hmm. and he had a whole section in there about his spiritual life. And the author, I don't know if he's secular or saved man, but he just went on and on raving about how Morse loved the Bible and believed it was inspired, all these things. And Morse was an artist before he became an inventor. And when he was in Italy painting paintings, he ran into a Catholic priest or a bishop of some clergy, and they kind of formed a correspondence and wrote back and forth. And the priest told Morse about a plot out of Vienna, Austria, called the St. Leopold Foundation for the Furtherance of Catholic Missions in America. That was basically an underground plot to infiltrate the America with immigration, with Catholics. Mm-hmm. America had just won 2 hot wars against Britain, and, you know, they weren't about to try to entice Mexico or Canada to invade, so they invaded through immigration.
Sure.
And here, there's so many wonderful things about this. One, he wrote, this is not some nut on the internet, this is Samuel Morse, who wrote 2 books that are in the Library of Congress. They're both small, maybe under 100 pages, and I got both of them through interlibrary loan, read them, where he's warning America that this is coming. And then a man by the name of, I can't remember the guy's name out of nowhere, but it's in my What Hath God Wrought book. This man had was a Harvard graduate, and he wrote a master's thesis on this very subject. It was a 500-page book. I quote him all through the chapter in What Hath God Wrought book of mine.
And it's how Roman Catholics are trying to take over America through immigration.
Yeah, so that's why you got 6 Catholic justices tonight, mm-hmm. and a Catholic president, and a Speaker of the House who's drunk all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, she's Catholic.
Yeah,
and plenty of, in other words, plenty of credibility. But the 2 funniest things is, one, I put that out in '96. People thought I was crazy, but then I got vindicated by Leonardo DiCaprio in the movie Gangs of New York, because it shows exactly what had happened.
Yeah,
all the big Catholic gang build up
mm-hmm.
in every major city. Mm-hmm. Paddy wagon, that's mm-hmm. an Irish nickname for a drunk. They're hauling them off to the jails.
What we have a new Pope, Pope Bob.
Yeah, Pope Bob.
From Cleveland or something? Chicago. Okay, that's right. Chicago. And Cubs fan.
Yeah.
And what's his stance? Because usually the popes denounce Trump and his immigration policy. What's Coach's Bob's stance on immigration?
Well, he doesn't like Trump. He's a liberal and conservative sheep's clothing type thing. Mm-hmm. He's starting off with all the conservative vestments as opposed to, his predecessor, which was man of the people, driving a little beat up car. So the worst part about it is it's the ultimate slap in God's face, in a way. In other words, America was carved out by God, a haven across the great pond, to give us a chance with the Bill of Rights to finally have a chance to spread the gospel. It was the most unique thing, Brother Young. When you go to 1 Timothy 2, 1 through 4, I exhort, therefore, first of all, supplication, intercessions, prayers, giving of thanks be made for all men, for kings, and for all that are in authority, that we may lead a quiet and peaceful life, in all godliness and honesty. For this is well-pleasing to God, who will have all men to be saved, come to the knowledge of the truth. In other words, that prayer took 17 centuries to answer. Paul got his head cut off the next year after he penned it. And it took 17 centuries before a portion of the body of Christ had a legitimate haven to flee to, which was America with the Bill of Rights. And now, Rome, we can take on Rome with a fair fight. No burning at the stake here.
Right.
Whoever gets the gospel out and their message out the fastest is going to win. But that's gone downhill, of course, through apostasy. And now it's like everything God gave us, it's been thrown away. And the fact that we got a Catholic Pope is the ultimate picture of that.
Can you explain to people?
Catholic Pope, from America.
So a lot of people, especially, if you have never read history and don't understand the power of the Roman Catholic Empire throughout history, and, what a threat it is for freedom of religion. America was the first country that had religious freedom as we know it in the world today. Is that not correct?
Pretty much so, yes, sir.
And so you would have some neutral countries, for instance, like Denmark, where the Pilgrims came from, but they were one little dot, because they were a neutral country, and so they allowed all religions to worship there. But if you were some sort of a power, you would have a state government.
That's why Spurgeon had metropolitan tabernacle. Baptists couldn't be called churches.
Could he call it a church?
Not in England, he couldn't.
Yeah, right. So that's why it's called a tabernacle.
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, and so yeah, if you go over to England, I got a chance to go over there last year and do a Christian heritage tour, and we went to Bone Hill, and it's about 1.5 acres, and there is 150,000 separatists buried there. John Wesley's mother's buried there.
Wow.
John Bunyan is buried there, the writer of Pilgrim's Progress, and Isaac Watts. There's some other great.
Wow.
So anybody who is not a part of the Church of England, now if you were high in the Church of England, I mean, if you're a citizen of renown, you were buried inside the church.
Wow.
And but if you were a member of the church, you get buried in the churchyard. I mean, you've been over to England. All the churchyards are about 10, 12 feet higher than the sidewalk because they just buried people on top of it, and the lawn kept on getting taller.
That's wild. I never heard that. That's interesting.
And so, yeah, that's why Metropolitan Baptist Tabernacle, because you couldn't use the word church because that belonged to the British government. So even in the 1800s in England, Charles Spurgeon didn't have complete religious freedom.
And 1 year after King James has his name attached to that Bible, he signs the death warrant of Edward Whiteman, a Baptist preacher who gets burned alive.
Yes.
And I'll tell you something interesting about Spurgeon. Probably one of the most interesting things to see the power of the right kind of preaching. When they had this giant mutiny in India and the British troops were slaughtered down there, they called for a national day of prayer and fasting. And it was the biggest thing because it caused shock because India was the jewel of the empire, they called it, right? Mm-hmm. And now everything's on shaking ground. So they have this massive indoor service that I know you're familiar with. 24,000 people jam inside, and they bring Spurgeon out to preach in the Church of England country.
Yeah,
they bring a Baptist minister in there, and he preached on the judgment of God, and he slept for 3 days after it was over. Drained him so bad,
and that was because there's no PA system. And so to speak to that many people, you had to, speak from the bottom of your toes. I mean, he had a big diaphragm. He was a big heavy-set fella. But after preaching for an hour or something like this to 24,000.
Hear ye the rod and who hath appointed it. That's
yes.
what he preached on.
And so and Spurgeon in his Metropolitan Tabernacle, which, you know how many it seated at that time?
How many
people seated in there?
I always heard the number around 5,000, but it could be give or take.
Yeah, but he would bring his preacher boys in there, and he would teach them how to whisper from the pulpit in that giant auditorium, and you'd be able to hear them in the balcony.
Did you get to
go in
without
PA? Yes, but the tabernacle today is not the tabernacle of Spurgeon's time, and that building did get bombed in World War. It got burned down after Spurgeon, his son James Archer, I think it was James Archer, Spurgeon took the pastorate after his father. It burned down during that period, and then the son rebuilt it, James, and then it got bombed during World War II. I was over there, heard Peter Masters preaching there. It was phenomenal service, phenomenal.
You know how Spurgeon reared his twin sons? He'd take them through the cemeteries, give them tape measures to go wander all over the cemetery measuring the graves till they could find one as little as they were. Imagine if somebody did that today. They'd lock them up. The welfare would take them away.
That's funny. I know. With his two boys, they both became preachers. Yeah. One was a missionary in Australia and came back and took his church, and the other one pastored somewhere in the area. He didn't baptize his boys until they were 18 because he didn't want them to make a false conversion profession, to please their dad or anything. So he figured by the time their 18th birthday rolled around, he would baptize them.
He also baptized his fiancée that he married. So he was, I think her name was Susan. Mm-hmm. So he was pastoring apparently then as a single man. I mean, I read his autobiography, 2 volumes, beautiful. You know how you get old, you can't remember all the details.
Well, Dad says when he was working at the steel mill, he remembers you constantly reading Spurgeon sermons.
And they were good, boy.
Yeah, and I think that, you guys had a lot of downtime there at the steel mill.
We both had downtime jobs. Only he got a higher pay grade than I did.
Yeah.
I had the second lowest pay grade in the whole factory. Only the janitors or laborers got lower than me.
Yeah.
Class 2, I was 4. I hooked up tanks with a crane.
Yeah.
And he was an inspector. He was the sharp guy.
Yeah.
We both had nothing to do when we were waiting, for the next tank to be moved.
Yeah, and you weren't really supposed to go to sleep, although a lot of guys would sleep on the job.
They land a nod.
But you'd have downtime, and you'd be reading Spurgeon sermons, and I think you try to read one a day or something like that.
Yeah.
Which would be an amazing practice. So Spurgeon's over in England, mid-1800s. I think he died about 1889 or maybe 1890s. He didn't make it to 1900. But over in Americas, we have full-blown religious freedom, where over in England and a lot of these European countries, even today, they have a state-funded church. Like if you go over to England, they have these beautiful Anglican buildings, just amazing, superstructures in every town. And the priest there and whoever works there is funded by the taxpayer.
Well, I'll tell you a crazy story, brother. What's his name? My dad was working as a doorman at 730 Park Avenue in Manhattan. You can Google that book. It's a whole book written about it. It's the wealthiest apartment building in all of New York, 730 or 740. They're twin buildings. Rockefeller had 2 floors and a private elevator in there. Every high roller you can think of lived in that building at the time. The head of the Chrysler family, Foy, F-O-Y, they had a suite there. But one Christmas, my dad said, he bought a Christmas tree for us that day, and he was going to put it up at the end of the night shift. He'd work 3 to 11. Got it in the morning with us, and he would decorate it or set it up for us that night. He never showed up. About 12 o'clock at night, my mother and I put it up. It's about 1957. Mm-hmm. Long story short, he comes. This all has to do with England and the state church system.
Yeah.
My dad comes stumbling into the house, about 1 a.m, drunk.
Uh-huh.
Did I ever tell you this story?
No, I haven't heard.
And my mother says, "Where were you, John?" And I was sleeping by this time, but they all relayed the story to me. He said, "I was drinking with the Duke." And he wasn't talking about the Duke of Earl or John Wayne. He was talking about the Duke of Windsor.
Uh-huh.
And, most of the viewers may not know who that was. He was the King of England.
Amazing.
He was the King of England at one time. Edward the 8th, 6th, I forget the number, maybe the 8th. But bottom line was, he was at a party, a Christmas party there where my dad was just getting off the shift. And he said to my dad, he stuck his head in my dad's office in the garage. "You got anything to drink down here, Johnny?" He says, "I'm tired of drinking with those stuffed shirts upstairs," which was the Chrysler family.
Okay.
So he snuck down, left his wife up there, and my dad and him got drunk in my dad's office. And then on the way back to the Waldorf Astoria with his wife, he drove my dad home. My dad stumbles upstairs. I was drinking with the Duke.
Well, at least he had a decent excuse for his wife, right?
Yes.
To his wife.
And my wife,
hey, the King of England, wanted to get drunk with me.
My mother, was in shock because my dad had all kinds of contacts because of being around that kind of crowd. But the key was the Duke of Windsor was the king.
Well, if you're the doorman, people don't realize that in these, and I want to talk about later Nikola Tesla because he lived there in New York City in one of these lofts. But the doorman's very important. So you tip him well because he's like one of your stop gates, security.
Yes, he is.
And then if let's say you're a mob and you live in the tower, well, you want that front doorman to love you so much that if the cops come in asking what number you live in, you call to up there and say, "Hey, I got police coming up there."
Hey, that is so true. He had a deal with Art Linkletter, my dad, that very thing. But the key thing about getting drunk with him, with Duke of Windsor, he was the King of England in charge of the church, church state, as well as the government. And he fell in love with an American divorcee. You probably know that, Wally Simpson, nicknamed Wallace Simpson. And they wanted to get married. That they told him he couldn't be the king if he married her because it would violate the religious rule of divorce.
Right.
So he gave up his crown to marry that woman. It's just like the Lord.
Isn't that amazing?
Stepped down to rescue his bride, us.
Yeah.
But my dad said one time Art Linkletter was in one of the buildings where he was a doorman. And Art Linkletter's, what I did was I was trying to witness to my dad, get him saved. Took years for somebody else to finally lead him to the Lord. But I'd try anything. I came home one day and he's watching Art Linkletter, or came to his house. "Hey, Dad, Art Linkletter said he's born again too, just like I am,
Right,
you know?
right, yeah.
And my dad starts winking at me like, you know, like I know something you don't know. And he gave him this kind of look, you know, Jack, Brother Jack. Yeah.
Yeah, you said.
Yeah, the next time you see Art, you know, ask him about 55 East End Avenue, you know, apartment 12E, you know, like this. You know, like, so I got to say, okay, Dad, what was that all about?
Right.
And he told me that Linkletter's wife was out of town, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And Art was up there with a bing bowl.
See, well, again, there's a guy who wants the doorman to really like him.
And his wife started, my dad spotted Art Linkletter's wife home a day early, coming down the sidewalk.
Call up to the apartment.
He ran into the phone.
Just so you, FYI, your wife just walked through the foyer.
And out the back door he went. Out the back door she went. And my dad got an extra big tip that Christmas.
Yeah, he deserved it.
And he told me one year Robert Kennedy was in one of the buildings and he gets, you know, the envelope. You know, the envelope, Christmas time.
Yeah.
He said, Billy, I got an envelope from Kennedy. And he said, all that was in there was a picture of his family. There was no cash. He said, what do I care about his family? I threw it in the garbage.
That's why he got shot too, didn't it? He had that mentality with the mob.
I actually shook his hand one time when he was running for some.
Yeah, you know what? So did my dad. He was running for president, and he was in the state of New York. Bobby was, and this, you know, it's RFK's Daddy.
Yeah.
Who RFK says that the CIA killed his dad. That's what he said.
Well, how many bullets did they dig out of the walls? More bullets
More
than
bullets
that
than
gun
one
held.
gun can hold. Yeah.
Spooky stuff. And
Yeah. But, yeah, Dad was in New York. I shook RFK's hand.
I shook his hand in New York. I was a little kid. He was in the back of a pickup truck.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll circle back to freedom of religion in America, but this is interesting. So what year did Nikola Tesla die?
You got me there. Boy, you got your little phone there.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask it. What year did Nikola Tesla die? January 7th, 1943. Were you alive?
I was born in 52.
Oh, man. So he was living in what building in New York City? Do you know?
Oh, no clue. I mean, it's Park Avenue draws the biggest,
Okay.
you know, the biggest of the big.
So Donald Trump, our president's uncle, was in charge of the FBI unit that raided Nikola Tesla's home and stole chests out of his chests with his handwritten notes and all his scientific material out of his apartment in New York City as soon as he died. So by the time the family got there, there was stuff missing.
Wow, I never heard that.
And so his uncle and the Trump family obtained the Tesla files. And so Nikola Tesla is, you know, he came up with, what was it, AC or DC currents?
Yeah.
Was it DC or something? But it was the less deadly one and a better, like a lot of people would argue, it was the better form of electricity versus, what's his name?
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison's. But Thomas Edison was a better networker and, you know, got in cahoots with whatever Morris or whoever the power companies were. So Tesla was on the outs, and he believed in a wire. You know, he can, and his science works today. They can, you know, I've seen on shows where they set up Nikola Tesla's little. He projects electricity, and they can have electricity sent through air. And so Donald Trump has, of course, Elon Musk head up Doge, and he, of course, Elon is famous for the electric car Tesla. And so Elon Musk is he's got the Starlink now. He's sending up all of these satellites into space. Okay?
That's how the Ukrainians bombed those Soviet nuclear bombers.
Yeah, isn't that
Skylink,
amazing?
through Skylink.
Yeah.
That was all arranged by MI6 or the CIA.
Oh,
or
absolutely.
both.
Yeah, and it was our weaponry that we gave them.
Sure.
we were probably in country with them, helping them.
And Trump tells Putin over the phone he didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Do you realize what a no-win situation he's in? If he didn't know about it, that means he's not in control of his own country, or if he knew about it, then he's lying.
That's a great point.
Sure it is.
Yeah. So besides all this other stuff, everywhere you'll never lose a cell phone signal and things like this. What the speculation is that this Tesla technology that Donald Trump holds the rights to, or he has his family, has the Tesla files with this Starlink up there, and then with his buddy Elon.
Don't forget, he's got the Epstein files too.
He's got that in his back pocket. So all these companies like GM, Chrysler, and then also all the Ford, all of these companies making these electric vehicles that nobody wants. But do these companies know that there is coming wireless electricity, and that's going to be the new power source that's going to power the future? And it's going to be done right after Tesla's plan of, he has some sort of a dome that sheds down free electricity to everybody. So if you have an electric car, you never have to recharge it. And it's just like your cell phone that, I get charged however much, information that I needed for my phone. It'd be the same way with your car. You get in your electric vehicle and just go, and you get a bill for electricity.
So what did Paul give under inspiration as one of the main nicknames for Satan?
As a star...
No, he saw
Prince
Satan,
of the Power of the Air.
Prince of the Power of the Air.
Yeah, there you go.
The power of the air was first tapped by Ben Franklin, wasn't it, with that kite?
Oh, yeah, that's good.
I saw Satan fall from heaven as lightning.
Yeah.
Remember Barack Obama, that bum?
Yeah.
Barack,
he was lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah, people thought he was the Antichrist.
And any engineer will tell you that, any electrical engineer will tell you that nobody ever in that field has been able to define electricity. They don't understand it. To this day, they don't understand it.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah, that's interesting. So Baptists in America, how did we impact religious liberty?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. There was a philosopher, an English philosopher named John Bright, and in Madrid, Spain, one year he was having a dinner with a Baptist preacher from Alabama, J.L.M. Curry. Curry was so significant in the history of Alabama that his bust was one of the two statues in what do they call it, Bust Hall? I mean, that's not the right name, is it?
I don't know.
Where they have each state has two figures represented in statues. So it's 100 busts. A statuary hall.
Okay.
So J.L.M. Curry was one of the two from Alabama for 100 years until he got bumped out by a Helen Keller, who was an agnostic, if not an atheist. But long story short, he was so famous. He was a theologian. He was a writer. He worked in Grover Cleveland's cabinet. I forget what he did. I put a lot of that in one of my books, But here's the deal. They were discussing accomplishments that Great Britain, gave to the world, one after another. And finally turned to Curry. He says, Has America given anything in particular of particular importance to the world's, positivity? He said he thought for a moment, then he said soul freedom.
Amen.
And he said Bright was stunned with the answer and then thought for a moment and said, a notable contribution indeed.
Yeah.
So the soul liberty.
Individual soul liberty, one of the tenets of Baptists.
I was just preaching in Mechanicsville, Maryland a month ago, and driving home on Route 20, you see in Virginia, you see the signs, Constitution Route. Sometimes it says Route of the Constitution. And it goes right past James Madison's mansion, Mount Pillier. Right on that little stretch of land, you'll come to Gumshoe Park, Gum something park. Not Gumshoe, Gum something park. But the main part of that area is a park called the Leland Madison Park, and I know you know all about it. I have a picture of it in two of my books. It's probably the holiest place in America, for real, because it's the site where the Baptist preacher John Leland, and I know you know this, but for the sake of the viewers,
tell it, please.
It's the site where the minister named John Leland lived. He was from New England, and he, at that time in Virginia, pastored two large Baptist churches at the same time. Kind of unusual. for being big churches, like Norris,
Right.
Detroit, and one in Texas. And the bottom line was James Madison had authored the Constitution after the Articles of Confederation era bombed, and he had to get the Constitution endorsed by 9 of the 13 colonies. Well, it just so happened that Virginia was the largest colony of all 13, bigger than New York at that time. If 12 colonies said yes and Virginia said no, it wouldn't go. Mm-hmm. That's where George Washington's from, Jefferson, all the key things, people we think of, right? So it had to be passed and ratified in Richmond. Every state had its own ratification convention. Delegates from the counties would go to the Capitol, debate, and then vote. So James Madison, who wrote the Constitution for the most part, was living in Orange County, Virginia, where this Baptist preacher had his church and lived. So James Madison, wanted to be one of the 2 delegates. Each county had 2 delegates. He you know what assuming does. Mm-hmm. He was assuming that he was a shoo-in because he wrote the thing, but he still had to get elected. So he's in Washington, D.C. rather than or Philadelphia, I think, doing things for the Constitution, writing these essays, trying to promote the value of it, and he wasn't home in Orange campaigning with the local moonshine guys, to be sure he'd be voted in. He gets a letter from his father. Dear son, you better get yourself back here quick. There's this preacher getting ready to get voted in. Madison's antagonist per se was Patrick Henry.
Right.
Patrick Henry didn't want the Constitution as it was because there was no religious liberty.
So Patrick Henry was running against James Madison, correct?
He was he was from his own county who would get elected. I forget what county he would come from. He would be the main spokesman ultimately in the showdown.
Oh, okay.
And everybody assumed it'd be Madison versus Henry. Mm-hmm. But they both had to get elected.
Right.
So Patrick was a problem. But Madison all of a sudden ran into opposition with this preacher who was going to vote against the Constitution. And, he was going to get elected himself as a Patrick Henry delegate.
So John Leland pastors the 2 biggest churches in Virginia, in the colonies, perhaps. And then he's this great speaker. And he's also running for office?
He's going to run as a delegate out of Orange County. And if they vote him in, they're going to vote a Confederate guy in with him. They'll both be Henry guys. Mm-hmm. But because Madison wasn't doing any campaigning. Mm-hmm. So at the last minute, he learns about this from his father in a letter, and he races back to Virginia in a snowstorm. This is in March. And a day or 2 days before the election, he calls on the preacher who lived in this area where this park is on 20. That's where his house was. It's not there now. It's a park. Leland Madison Memorial Park. It's big league. It's all documented. You go to Mount Pillier, James Madison's mansion with the bookstore. The highest end books ever written about Madison deal with this story. Mm-hmm. No one's ever heard it though. And so bottom line is he prevails on the preacher to change his mind by saying if we don't get it through now, we'll never get everybody close enough to vote it in. If we get it in, that's our foot in the door. I promise you I'll tack a Bill of Rights on next, but we got to get started. Patrick Henry wanted to throw it all out and redo it. And so at the last minute, he agreed. A day or 2 later, they have the local election.
So James Madison meets with John Leland, the famous preacher who was running for his office, and they work out an agreement, and the agreement is to pass a Constitution, and I will add this Bill of Rights.
That's what he promises the preacher.
And so us who are proud to be Baptists would say, it's a Baptist Bill of Rights.
It's as historically accurate as you can shake a stick at. Mm-hmm. The next day, they have the election, right? Nobody knows about what happened. James Madison gets up and speaks for 2 hours in a dull monotone. Everybody goes to sleep, but they're all clapped to be friendly when he's done. Then the preacher gets up on some kind of a tobacco bale, what they call it. He stood up on it and spoke for 5 minutes, they said. And he basically said, you all know that my position has been, for Mr. Henry, but Mr. Madison assures me that we're in trouble if we don't pass it. And he promises to give a Bill of Rights. Vote your conscience, but I'm going to go and switch my allegiance.
Yeah.
And he stepped down. And everybody, like in the movie The Alamo, did this mean what I think it do? Them two guys, everybody got shocked.
Yeah.
So guess what happened? He and his candidate blew the other guy out the water. The guy's name was Colonel Barbaro, was going to be one of the main guys for Patrick Henry. He got blown out, and Madison got to go to
And James Madison had the mighty pen. I mean, it was his, in a sense, he penned the Constitution with his own hand, right?
Yeah.
And so we might not have a Constitution or a Bill of Rights if it wasn't for John Leland's influence.
Of course. Well, here's
decision to get behind.
Here's
James
the ultimate
Madison.
proof. Here's the ultimate proof, Brother Jack. So Madison gets to go to Richmond because he got elected at the last minute because of that Baptist preacher alone. Now, he and Patrick Henry battle it out as the main spokesman for 2.5 months in the summertime. It's wild. A lightning bolt hits the church or the building where they were in. Patrick Henry says, "It's the judgment of the Almighty." Everybody runs out of the building or goes home. He's the great. They said he spoke as Homer wrote. He was the greatest orator of the time. He's going to be a governor of Virginia 6 times.
Patrick Henry.
Yeah, give me liberty, give me death.
He stuck out his hand as if he stabbed himself with his imaginary sword.
I think it's St. John's Church, Episcopal Church. But here's the bottom line, ultimate proof, Pastor. They took the final vote, and it passed with Madison, answering all the objections, 89 to 79. It only passed by 10 votes with James Madison fighting everything Patrick Henry brought up. Now, go back, and Leland does not endorse Madison. Leland goes. James Madison's in the alley looking in the window in Richmond, maybe. He can't go in the building. He never got elected. And Patrick Henry's in there unopposed now. What do you think the final vote would have been on that, see? It's beautiful. Secular historians, grudgingly give Leland that credit.
Yeah.
And in my book,
historical fact.
in How Satan Turned America Against God, and in my book, Perilous Times, I give all the documentation.
Hey, so, speaking about history and something that's brought up all the time, can you explain Thomas Jefferson's connection with the Danbury Baptists and the phrase separation between church and state? Like, what does this mean, and what was the historical context?
The bottom line was that the government can't get into the business of the church. It wasn't that the church was not supposed to have any religious, participation within government. It was that the whole principle of the state church in Virginia, that's where all the Baptists were going to jail left and right. They were going to jail because they wouldn't request a license to preach. And so there was that cloud always of what you had in England.
And so Thomas Jefferson, do you have any insights on his attitude towards Baptists?
Sure. I have some. I have some. If you go up,
but didn't he highly esteem Baptists and
yes, he did.
Really loved their philosophy.
He loved it. He had an aunt. He had either 2 aunts and 1 sister, or 2 sisters and 1 aunt who were Baptists. That much we know, right, in his family. And if you go up I-75 in Kentucky and get to about mile marker 91, and you look to the right, you'll see right off the highway, you can see it. It's a man's property, and there's a clump of trees with a stone wall around the clump of trees, maybe 3 feet tall. And that's a little graveyard there on this guy's backyard of a house. And Andrew Tribble is buried there, who was the First Baptist Church pastor of Lexington, and First Baptist pastor of the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Boonesboro, which is the next exit. Daniel Boone era Boonesboro, and he back in Virginia before he got here to this area, because all these areas switched around. Part of it was West Virginia, now it's Kentucky. You got to trace down exactly what's what. But anyway, he used to be Thomas Jefferson's next door neighbor for the most part, down the road. And Jefferson would go to his church business meetings occasionally, monthly meetings, to watch the Baptists vote on business. He didn't go to the preaching, but he was awestruck at how, he said, this is the purest form of democracy.
Yeah.
And he would have Andrew Tribble at his home for dinner in Monticello periodically.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing.
Yeah, so Baptists and religious liberty.
Oh, yeah.
Go hand in glove.
Very much so. There's so much. Again, it's so holy, preacher.
Mm-hmm.
It's a prayer. It's an answer to prayer that took 17 centuries.
And so you're talking about the birth of religious liberty. And, similar to how the nation of Israel was birthed. We brought out into the wilderness. Moses goes up on top of Mount Sinai, comes down with a document, we the people. And then that was how the nation of Israel was born. There's no other nation on earth born the same way as America and as Israel.
Boy, that's exciting.
Yeah, so Moses comes down with this document, and it's all that the Lord said we will do.
It was we.
Yeah, it was we the people.
You remember last night?
Even Moses is under submission to the law.
You remember last night? I'm ready to preach for you.
Yeah.
I'm in the auditorium, wandering around on a phone call.
Yeah.
See me in there?
Yeah.
I got a phone call 10 after 6. You know who it's from? I got a picture of the guy in my book, Holy Ground, the Israeli version of the American sniper. One of the top snipers in the whole IDF back in the 90s.
Wow.
He's a Nashville resident now, sells real estate, one of the very top realtors in the whole city of Nashville. His name is Zion.
So you're saying he's knocking off his competition?
Well, he showed me more pictures that he asked me not to put in the book.
Sure.
I mean, the blindfolded Hamas dudes being taken away in trucks. He's involved in all these special ops missions. I got the photographs. I just couldn't print them. I printed one when he's just walking around leading a mission. But he was one of the top snipers. But you know what? He just experienced a serious tragedy in his life, and he called Pastor Bill. Which was, I've been praying for him for 20 years. We've been to Israel together. And he ran into several Messianic Jews, he said. You see how God will start doing that stuff?
Wow.
And it's working on him. And I'm trying to lead him to the Lord. And I brought him up to Michigan on the 70th anniversary of Israel's statehood. And he and I were guests at a church in Heartland, Michigan. And he spoke just from an IDF perspective. Talked about these, Hamas dudes blowing up into the air. Boy, all these people jumped on him on the Facebook, jumped on us.
Yeah.
We were glorying in all those body parts flying everywhere. And by the way, I should tell you, these Jews are so crazy, preacher. He told me the worst Jewish joke I've ever heard. Jews are like that. He said, Bill, did you know why Hitler shot himself? I said, why? He said he saw the gas bill.
Oh, boy, yeah. That's a bad one.
And Joan Rivers, they always had Holocaust jokes. The blacks use the N-word. The Jews tell Holocaust jokes.
That is human humor because, some of the people who have the funniest humor are like EMTs, firemen, and you talk to them, they go on a scene. I mean, what are you going to do? Cry all the time? So you got to make jokes.
That's true.
Like, oh, we got a stinker over here. Or I remember a guy, the fireman in our church, retired fireman, and they showed up at a scene, and a lady at a car accident, a lady's arm was off the side of the road. And so when a guy picked it up, he hollered out to the boys. He said, cancel piano lessons. And so again, I get people think, oh, that's terrible. Well, again, you gotta laugh at something.
Well, that guy the man that wrote the afterword to how Satan turned America against God, we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah,
was one of the four horsemen of the atomic age. Albert Einstein with the atom, Ed Teller, the hydrogen bomb, and Oppenheimer, the atom bomb, and Sam Cohen was the neutron bomb. And he worked on the atom bomb in 1943 and invented the neutron bomb in 1958. So, we got to become friends because a congressman in Oklahoma connected us one time. Long story, I won't go even into any of it. But he called my house once a week for 7 years. Once a week for 7 years. If I'm lying, may the Lord strike you dead.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he just liked to chat.
Sam Cohen.
Yeah, but
the father of the
neutron bomb. And he told me one time, he had arthritis. He was housebound.
What did he like to talk about when he called
Everything.
once a week?
Mostly Jewish jokes. I told him one time, I said, Sam, do you know why? Wait a minute, let me get back to what I was going to forget to tell you. He told me the reason Jews lead the comedy industry. Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah. By
all
far.
All of them.
By
Joan Rivers, Don Rickles.
Yeah.
Sure. And vaudeville before that.
Yeah.
Now, you're never going to hear this on the History Channel.
Yeah.
You ready for this?
Uh-huh.
He said, that's because Jews as a people, now he's a Jew, are very paranoid.
Sure.
Remember the verse says they'll shake like a leaf over new
Yeah.
ground? He said, and so we try to get people to like us.
Oh, yeah.
Don't kill us. Let me make you laugh.
Yeah. Wow.
Where are you going to get that on the History Channel?
No, but that has got to be so true because the Jews have been scattered from their homeland and this wandering people group, wandering Jew, government within a government, and been persecuted on every continent.
Well, I told him one time, I said, Sam, I said, I got a real bad joke for you this time. I said, and I witnessed to him, of course, a lot too. And he listened. He really did. I said, Sam, I said, I got a real rough one for you this time. You might not like this joke. He said, oh, Bill, he had a hoarse voice. I could never be mad at you. I mean, the Lord knit our hearts. It's crazy. He said, go ahead. I said, well, do you know why Jews have big noses? Got quiet. He said, why?
I can't believe I didn't know that.
I said, because air is free.
Yeah.
And he fell off the floor out of his chair laughing.
It must have been funny that he thought he got that far in life without hearing that one.
And he got up and he said, instead of a hate crime and being mad at me, it takes goofy church people to get offended at things.
Sure.
Here's the Jew. He was laughing his head off. He said, I'll give you one better than that. He said, what's a real Jewish dilemma? I said, what? He said, a free ham sandwich. Listen, can I tell you this? I know you're running short on time, but I will tell you the strangest thing of all, how we got connected.
Yeah.
Somebody, I was doing a chapter in the How Satan book on the Oklahoma bombing, and I met with Charles Key, the Oklahoma congressman, who had put a book out. We led a citizens task force investigation because the local people didn't trust the government version. I mean, here's the building here, right?
Did you know I was down in Oklahoma City when that went off? I was in school in either 11th or 12th grade, and we
you
heard
were living
it
there in school.
Yeah. No,
that's when your dad was working for Brother Vineyard.
Yeah, I was at Windsor Hills Baptist School.
Oh.
When that went off, we thought that a jet had gone over top, because you got Tinker Air Force Base there. We thought a jet had gone over top of the school and broke the sonic barrier.
Wow.
And it was a sonic boom. That's what my teacher guessed.
You heard it.
But then we thought it was a gas main. Then when we found out what it really was, we were all sitting in the classroom with the TV screens on, and you have two John Does who are Muslim, or not, two Middle Eastern John Does on the run that we were supposed to be looking for in Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
And later this Timothy McVeigh thing came up. But did I ever tell you I met Janet Davis's
Yeah, we used to talk on the phone a lot.
So Janet Davis's husband, I can't remember his name, Mr. Davis, he comes into the grocery store that I'm working in. It's a very nice neighborhood, Albertson's grocery store, comes back to the butcher block, and he had this shirt on that said CIA. And I said, so how long you been with the agency? And he said, well, actually, we just met with the former head of the CIA, and I can't remember who it was, but it was about the Oklahoma City bombing. He said, my wife is Janet Davis.
Yeah.
And I ordered that book that she wrote, The Third Terrorist. So she had 19 different interviews of people seeing Timothy McVeigh with Middle Eastern men.
Yeah. I talked to her a lot. She told me what motel, Cactus something.
Cactus Motel.
And I got a picture of it.
To Northwest 10th Street in Oklahoma City.
I got a picture of the room.
Yeah.
It's in the Holy Ground book.
Oh, okay.
That's creepy stuff. Well, of course, as you know, and your viewers may not know, here's the building right here. Here's the truck parked next to the courthouse. And, the bomb supposedly blasted the courthouse. They got pieces of the courthouse over here, half a mile away. Boom! Well, the bottom line, before I forget the detail, so the congressman gives me this book. Well, in the book, there is a letter from Sam Cohen. They solicited his opinion as a physicist about, how much. And he said it would have been absolutely impossible and against the laws of nature for a truck full of fertilizer, no matter how much was used, to bring this building down, because there were internal charges. But long story short, I'm looking at that in my motel room in North Carolina, reading his letter inside of a book. They just pasted on a page. It's his personal stationery with his home phone number on it.
No way.
And the Holy Spirit said, why don't you call the dude?
That's wild.
What'd you call the dude to get an interview?
And where did you get this book again?
From Charles Key, the congressman in Oklahoma who led the investigation.
Was it the congressman's letter? Was Sam Cohen writing back to the congressman?
Yeah, see, they solicited his opinion about the whole thing, and that was his answer.
Man, that's a federal crime you did, reading someone else's mail.
Oh, ain't that the truth? Well, here's the killer part. I said to the Lord, there's no way I'm going to get through to him. He won't talk to me. He said, go ahead, give it a shot.
Yeah.
I'm in a hotel in North Carolina, so I call on my cell phone, nervous. Hello? He's smoking a cigar on an exercise bike. 82 years old in Los Angeles, living 3 houses down from where the O.J. Simpson murder took place in prison.
Okay.
Hello? And I'm nervous as a cat, so I basically tell him I'm writing a book. Congressman Key gave me your address. Your contact information. I wonder if I could get a short interview. Blah, 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 blah. He talked to the devil. He's just lonely,
Yeah.
So he gave me a 45-minute interview. But here's the funny part of the whole story, and I'll probably finish up your interview with this crazy tidbit. Long story short, at that time, I had not had the courage to tell him I was a Baptist preacher. He's a Jew. He's an atheist. He's a physicist. He's 80-something years old. You think he wants to contribute to some Baptist preacher Yehu's book? So I finally said I was guilty. I felt guilty. I'm scamming a Jew. That's not a good feeling. So at the end, I said, by the way, Mr. Cohen, did I happen to tell you that I'm a Baptist preacher too? I could see the cigar fall out of his mouth over the phone. And I could tell he was his P-I-S-S-E-D a bad word. That's how the Jew would have said it. He was mad. But he was too proud to show it. He was too liberal to show it.
Okay.
So he wasn't going to retract the interview now, right?
Yeah.
So you know what he did? He dusted me. He dusted me. He said, this is what he said. He said, by the way, Mr. Grady, did you tell me you live in Knoxville, Tennessee? I hadn't mentioned that. He said, would you believe I learned how to eat hominy grits in Knoxville, Tennessee in 1943 when I came through Oak Ridge for my security clearance for the Manhattan Project. He said, and then this is what he said, I can remember like it was yesterday. He said, imagine that, a Jew boy from Brooklyn eating hominy grits. And as soon as he said that, the Holy Spirit said, as clear as I'm talking to you.
Send him some grits.
He said, he's getting rid of you. Get off quick. Oh, well, that's funny, Mr. Cohen. Well, thank you so much for the interview. I couldn't hang up quick enough because I'm getting away with murder. As soon as I hung up, the Holy Ghost said, send him a box of grits from Knoxville again. And I sent him a thank you letter a couple weeks later, and I sent him another box of grits in a package to his address in Brentwood, California. About 2 weeks later, I'm preaching in Kentucky, for one of my former students. I'm in the preacher's office and my phone rings. It's my wife. She said, I've been out of town for 3-4 days visiting grandkids and I just got home. You got 3 messages on your answering machine back in the old, this is 2005.
Yeah.
3 days in a row from this Sam Cohen cat who thinks you walk on water over these grits. You better call him back, man. He thinks the world of you. And I called him and
man, buddies, you became buddies.
And here's your verse. Down in the human heart, crushed by the tempter, feelings lie buried that grace can restore. Touched by a loving heart, awakened by kindness, chords that are buried can vibrate once more. God hath chosen the foolish things of the world, a box of grits. And we became best. To win over one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. You read any book I have, I couldn't help it because he gave it to me. He said, I consider Bill Grady to be the most unusual friend I've known in my 84 years. 7 years he called my house every week. If I wasn't there, he'd talk to my wife for 30 minutes. And
you knew he knew a lot of interesting people in his lifetime too. So that's a good compliment, man.
He briefed 7 presidents on the neutron bomb.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But, only God can do those things.
That's amazing.
Only God can open it. You go to Wikipedia, there's a whole section on him and I in there. I didn't even put it in there.
Yeah.
I don't know who put it in there.
Yeah. Hey, let's close it down this way. So we talked about the birth of America and religious liberty, the influence of Baptists on our religious liberty that we have enjoyed, this birth of a nation similar to Israel. You wrote books about this, but in one of your books is How Satan Turned America Against God. What do you think historically were some of the infiltrations or some of the ways that Satan turned America against
God? Well, James
God?
Madison, when he died, you leave your last will and testament. he left a little paper that said nobody can, accuse me of being political for me to have this opened after I die. And it was a couple of 2-3 paragraphs, and it basically was a warning to America. Beware of serpents in paradise. Back to my theme of my new book, crooked, fly straight and fly right, and serpents, everything. Beware of serpents in paradise. And I have a chapter in that How Satan book called Serpents in Paradise, and I gave the 3 leading ones, in my humble opinion, were Roman Catholic immigration, the Civil War with all the racial divide, and the secret societies. Rush Limbaugh made fun of conspiracy theorists forever. He had something called the Limbaugh kook test.
Right. Oh yeah, I remember
that.
Yeah, anytime the black helicopter crowd.
But he
would mock.
He spent the last 2 years of his physical life walking it back and apologizing.
Yeah.
I had a chapter in my book, The Limbaugh Kooks, and I listed 100 people. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, that warned America about these infiltrating influence. And, right on.
And now the deep state.
Sure.
Questioning 9/11.
Elon Musk telling Rogan, if I released everything I found, I'd be a dead man. That swamp Trump thought he was going to drain is a lot bigger than Trump.
Yes. Yeah, it's a huge, massive, worldwide web.
Yeah.
Flowing through the United States.
He did. And, Satan said to Jesus in Luke 4, so the Bible's probably true, preacher. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Jesus said Satan said, all this power is mine, and I give it to whomsoever I will.
Yeah.
So, thank God the Bible is true, and thank God the King of Kings is coming.
Hey, what's some encouraging things you've seen in recent days?
Nothing. You remember Jack House said, I'm positive things are going downhill. Well, to be honest with you, if the Bible's true and we're getting close to the end, things have to keep going downhill. The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. You know what Debbie Downer means? It's a shame that you have to have that attitude. But everything has to end on a crash. Every verse is negative. The day of the Lord shall not come except there's a falling away, as it was in the days of Noah. Perilous times shall come. When the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith on the earth? On and on, it never ends. So it's going down.
So you don't think we're on the cusp of a golden age?
That's a sad thing, isn't it? See, the problem with Mr. Trump is he's doing everything right on the practical end that people care about, but he has no clue about international, geopolitical, nothing. No, he's going to end the Ukraine war in a day. Now we say, let him fight it out a while. He has no idea what he's doing in there. But and then of course he wants to buy Gaza, turn it into a casino and
amusement park. Yeah, good luck with that.
No, you see, remember Uzzah was smitten by God for his error.
Yeah,
he just tried to save the ark from hitting the ground, and God cut him in half with a lightning bolt. So Trump is messing with the one area that he can't, afford to mess with. He doesn't know. I don't think Paula White led him to the Lord. Do you?
No.
So and of course, your political person doesn't have to be saved.
No.
But the Lord's just allowing the devil to play him like a fiddle right now, because things have to end on a crash. Yeah. They can't be a golden age. Yeah. The only good thing about the first time he won and the time he's here now is we're getting a little more of a respite or a little reprieve.
Yeah. It's
space for grace.
Trump's standing there with his finger in the dike.
So we can, more freedom.
Yeah.
A little. That's Amen. All there is.
Yeah.
But to think that we're going to get the millennium, you might as well become a post-millennial.
And pendulums swing back and forth. And I mean, Satan works in different ways and different times. Don't you agree?
Trump to Biden.
Yeah.
Trump won, the Biden won. Yeah, that's a swing and a half. Ain't
yes. Yeah, and then all those prayers that people said in 2020, we were all scared to death in 2020, if you remember. I mean, the world... the craziness that's going on in the world.
What about
we're losing freedom of speech. I mean, I guarantee you, just the stuff we talked about already in this podcast, it would be taken off of YouTube.
Sure.
And so we have a modicum of religious freedom right now.
Remember, we couldn't buy toilet paper.
Yeah.
But before you close we're having so much fun because with all the sincerity I can say, I don't have very many preacher friends that are anywhere near as well read as Pastor Young. And that's why I love to talk with him. I enjoy this podcast. The time flies. So bottom line, as the Three Stooges used to say, they're working their mother through college. I'm working my mother through college, and the book sales pays for the tuition of her college courses. Just joking. If anybody wants any of my books,
GradyPublications.com.
Yeah.
Fabulous books. I think every preacher ought to have every single one of your books.
Yeah, well,
they're a great reference source.
Yeah, it'll help you. Like when I preach in North Carolina, they say, Brother Grady's here to help us.
Yeah. And your last book, we did a whole podcast episode about it.
Oh, yeah.
What must I do to be saved?
If you want an excellent book to give to an unsaved person, like a gospel tract, only now is 63 pages of explanation line upon line.
You can buy a case of them for how much?
Probably $300 and something on my website.
And so I
60 books in a case.
Especially if your pastor's listening to it, like buy a case, because they're just such a great thing to give. Because I think in our society, you ain't going to lead someone to Christ in 5 minutes.
No.
I mean, you might if they've been in church all their life or in your church all their life, and they decide to get saved. But a lot of people have questions about salvation. So we have this like right in our bookstore, and I'll give them to somebody who I've gone through the gospel with. I say, read this. This is written by a friend of mine, and I believe you'll enjoy it. It's just short, few chapters. How many chapters did
10 chapters, 63 pages.
So 63 pages.
John and Romans in the back.
Yeah.
QR code on the front where they can listen to it on their phone.
So you can listen to the audio book.
Yeah. We got over 20,000 out already just in a very short time. I just stayed in Mechanicsville, Maryland. Greg Nash, House Anderson graduate, old former Marine, or no such thing as a former Marine. I stayed in a lovely RV, almost brand new. A guy read the book and got saved. A Catholic guy gave that to the church. You know what I mean? I'll be preaching in Pennsylvania coming up in a week from now. Mark Bider's church, nice man. And your dad just preached there.
Yeah.
And there's a big old guy in there about that big. You know, he read the book and he got saved and joined the church. I'll renew contact with him. Yeah. So people are getting saved, and it's helping preachers. You get a case of 60 for $300 something. What must I do to be saved?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful art on it. It's a good looking book. And it's not a book you're, ashamed to give to your.
That was $3,000
doctor.
That was $3,000 painting. The top illustrator in the South painted that whole painting. Paul's ankles are bruised here. This cracks up the steps. This is the Philippian jailer.
How come you don't bring that picture to sell?
That's a good question.
Because I got your Holy Ground picture over there on my wall. See that right there? And then I've got a Perilous Times picture over there on my wall.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question.
What are you going to send me? You going to send me that picture or what? Oh. I mean, you sent a guy grits.
Yeah.
You sent Cohen grits there.
You're breaking up.
I can't hear you. I'm losing the signal.
Hey, guess what? I'm leaving here and driving straight to Holland, New York to preach tonight. And then I don't know where I'm going tomorrow night. I mean, I'll be all over 20 churches in the next. I finish up in Branson, Missouri on the 4th of July.
So if someone wanted to have you at GradyPublications.com, they get your information on that?
On my book or on my website. I have my phone number posted there, where they can text me. And I got a phone call yesterday from a college professor and a lawyer in New Jersey. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. He's pastoring a church all of a sudden for 8 years, wants me to preach for him. He's so crazy. He wrote a song about me 20 years ago. He couldn't wait for me to hear it. It's a silly, sang a song on a guitar. He's a college teacher, teaches government and law. He's a lawyer, but he's a fundamental, King James guy. I just got a call from him yesterday. My phone number is in my website. Anybody, if you got a small church, I love the smaller churches. I go anywhere if God's in it. And you call me, you contact me, and I have no problem going anywhere unless you got to be a Baptist church and a King James guy.
All right, man. Hey, thanks for being on, Brother Grady. We appreciate it very much, man.
I'm a lot looser on this one than any other previous podcast. We had a great service last night, and I appreciate your preacher so much.
Amen. And Brother Grady's got to get on the road again.
Yeah, with Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash.
Amen. Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Pastoral Thoughts Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at pastorthoughtsmail@gmail.com. Also, if you want to check out more about our ministry here, you can visit pastorjack.org. I do have a blog that I do write. I'd love to have you as one of my subscribers there. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening. God bless you.